Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we'll be discussing Chapter 7 of Whither Are We Traveling? Sounding Brass and Tinkling Cymbal.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual crew of Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles number 153 up in Kelowna, British Columbia. Worshipful Brother Jarrod Dunham from Penticton 147 in Penticton, British Columbia. Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon number 60 here in Auburn, Washington. And I'm Very Worshipful Brother Matt Appel, and I am in Mill Creek Lodge number 243. Forget my own lodge number. And we meet in Motley Terrace, Washington. So I think I'm going to set Jarrod off by saying that usually on these I have a number of criticisms of both style and substance of the various chapters. And so Chapter 7, honestly, is my favorite so far. I won't quite say 10 out of 10 no notes, but it's pretty high up there on my list. Did you guys have a general impression? Nope. Okay, thank you all for listening. Stephen, you're unmuted. What did you think?
Well, I only got to have it read to me once, so it wasn't the most in-depth reading I've done, but it talks about Masonic charity and a lot, and I'm of different opinions when it comes to Masonic charity. I don't seek out the recognition for having done things, yet we always do things in the background, whether it's to help a brother of our lodge, a widow that we know is in need, or something like that. And so I've never been a seeker of that recognition, so I have I believe it should be done in the background. So when they talk about us and how much we do or don't do, really, is there a true gauge for it when a lot of it goes unseen? That was my thought.
I agree. If you're doing a lot of this stuff behind the scenes and not, like you said, not going, well, I just whatever, took dinner to a cancer patient, ha ha ha. You're not. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't get noticed. Anybody else have any general impressions? Jarrod, David? No. Okay, then. So one of the things that I did notice was
race to the mute button. I would agree that I think he talks around this one as well as the next one it was a little bit circular. He does that a lot in his articles. They're very circular conversations, sometimes contradictory in my opinion. On he starts his article, he's going down one path, and then he'll get later in the article he'll seem like he contradicts himself, and there's some of that here. But I guess the idea is that we're supposed to be charitable, and I do like that he started off saying not only what's the lodge doing charitably, but what are we individually doing charitably? And I think that's important too, that while the lodge might need to be charitable, it's really more important for the Mason themselves to be charitable as a member of the lodge. And I wonder myself how many Masons are benevolent individually outside of their lodge.
And I would further wonder if it is benevolent, like he is obviously unenthusiastic about writing a check from a distance, and thinks that people should be more involved directly performing acts of charity, bringing people dinners or driving them places or whatever the case. And I found myself wondering, so like actually just before we got on the Zoom call here, I had another meeting. We were doing our budget for the lodge for the year. and there was a debate over how much money we should give to the local food bank from the lodge. And I couldn't help but think of this article and think, how about we go and volunteer at the local food bank and, give of ourselves a little more instead of just having the lodge write a check from a distance, or having, because and again, this goes into, like you were saying, the next subsequent chapter, there is something to be gained, not just in giving of oneself in these instances, but of having the lodge go to the food bank as a unit and having whatever 6, 8, 10, 12 guys go and help out with a project and work shoulder to shoulder on something builds a camaraderie that I personally think is important and helps out more than, well, we each threw $50 in a hat.
True. Yeah. Like every December, one of the Lodge brothers is involved with the church, and they do this collection of clothing for the homeless. And, my house is used as the drop zone, if you will, for the collection. And so, there's I guess you would say a small group of us that are involved with that we do that every year, and then there's other guys that we see that are involved with the food bank, and they donate a lot of their time there, right? And so, I see I see the local membership doing these things. I don't see a lot done from the lodge unless it is to do with more of a widow situation, or a brother in need, or unless they've been made aware of somebody in the community that is in need, right? So, it's different because when like when I went to Cuba and I saw them take up a collection, their regular collection, and they took up a separate collection for the widows of a guy who just broke his leg and won't be able to work, and so on, right? So there was different things done in their collection process to accommodate these different needs too, right? So, is it really supposed to be a public thing? I don't really believe that benevolence and charity is supposed to be. So
I thought you were going to say they got up a collection to raise enough money to get you a plane ticket off the island, but
no, they threw me on the first boat, man.
I will say I was curious. He mentions that each lodge in Indiana, at least in the 60s when this was written, was required to have I forget what they called it, like fraternal assistance fund or something along those lines. And I was curious if that still exists. I went to the Grand Lodge of Indiana website and I couldn't find their whatever Masonic code equivalent posted publicly. So I was curious to know if that's still a thing, or if it's disappeared since then.
Well, and again, I think it really leans on the idea that we as individuals are supposed to be charitable or benevolent in our own right. Are we, if the lodge didn't exist, if Freemasonry didn't exist, are we still charitable in the sense? And as we talk about what charity really is, as far as Freemasonry goes, charity we say is brotherly love, not even so much the financial. We think of charity as giving something or giving, but really it's a giving of ourselves, like you mentioned, Matt, and giving of our time. And I think that's the real meaning of charity as it connects to Freemasonry. And then if you relate it to what he's talking about, he keeps going over and over again about individualistic and what's the true meaning, and our own communities and ourselves. And he keeps talking about the individual. And so I think it's an awful long article about, hey, what are you doing if the lodge didn't exist and you weren't a Freemason? Are you still charitable? Are you living up to the tenets of Freemasonry and the idea of being charitable and benevolent to your community and to your neighbor and to yourself potentially?
Yeah, I always tell new guys that Masonry is not a charity, but Masonry should inspire you to be charitable, to have exhibit that love of others, for love of the stranger, or whatever it is, that agape love.
Yeah, I think he mentions that too. That random acts of kindness in that second section, he talks about perform their own acts of charity, voluntary acts, impulsive acts without organization, without advanced planning, and blah blah blah. Yeah, and I think he even says he wants the membership to send that. I guess it's Grandmaster Missouri. Sorry, but yeah, what if we had everybody stand up every meeting and said, "Okay, what did you do this month? What would the responses be for the membership? What did you do to be charitable in your act as an individual, not even as a Freemason, but exemplifying the ideals of Freemasonry?"
So it's almost like Rainbow. They ask you for your service hours every
Yeah,
meeting,
right.
Yeah. Jared's
All right,
pretty
Jarrod, I'm not
quiet.
going to let you go. You got it. You got any thoughts here?
It's tax season.
Well, no, it's not even just that. It's that no, because I'll just come across as grumpy. Well, because we always there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's too much of an emphasis put on dollar donations, and whatever happened to charity of thought. Like, have you, when you're talking with someone, did you try and see it from their point of view? Were you, like I personally think there's too much of an emphasis put on charity in Freemasonry, because we always equate charity with giving, and so we tend to forget that not thinking badly of someone, being charitable in the way that you think of people, being charitable in the way that you act with people, it's not something you can't stand up and say, hey, I was talking to this guy the other day, and I mean, he was spouting off some pretty stupid things, but so
instead of lashing out at him, he didn't lash out, and so then that's a part of our act. Yeah, I would
or even tried to see it from his, like,
sure.
The last couple of years have shown me that there is a very what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lack of charitable thought towards other Freemasons and the world. So I think we need to stop focusing on, what has your lodge given your community, and start focusing more on, how have you been a good person in the way that you've acted and thought about other people. Did you read something stupid on Facebook? Did you lash out, or did you just take a minute and not lash out?
Would it also be part of the levels of development of ourselves too? And when you first become a Freemason, maybe it takes a lot of effort to hold that back, and so that may be Masonic to consider that, or somebody else, it might be there may be a different level where you're very philosophical, very introspective of that ideas of charity, versus somebody is, I don't know, is that a higher level?
Well, it's definitely it's a higher level in that you actually have to sit back and think before you react. So, and that once again, that goes with our tenets, is that you're supposed to educate yourself, become a better person. And part of that is, learning how to think charitably towards others that don't share the same opinion as you.
Yeah.
All right. And I don't remember when it was, but I do have to agree that I now, as I've grown and learned these things, I do stop to do that a lot more often. I'm not as quick to react to what I refer to as stupid people, right? And I bite my tongue more often, and so that I'm not giving that knee-jerk reaction. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm being a little more charitable in how I respond to people and things I experience.
Is it possible also that it could just be our age? As I've gotten older, I've certainly become more open to ideas, or more reserved, and like Steve said, sometimes I think, boy, I might think something, but I may not say something. So is that Masonic, or is that just age, or is that, I don't know. Is it, I suppose I could blame it on Masonry because I've been a Mason a while, but.
Well, I don't know. I would think that Masonry has helped develop me into who I am, and being that I've been there a quarter century almost, it's one and the same, right?
Yeah, because I have friends that I've known for 30 years, and as they've gotten older, they haven't gotten wiser. So I think, in all honesty, it's probably, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, a little bit more of column B, because we joined Freemasonry. It's been, it's hard not to be shaped from it, even just, peripherally. Peripherally, is that a word?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Through osmosis, even. Yeah. I'd have to agree with that statement, definitely.
One of my good brothers, he has said in the past, I think we've talked about this before, that everybody comes into Freemasonry at a different point and different level, and he said after a few years, he said, David, I was very Masonic today. And I mean, he just didn't yell at the guy that cut him off when he was driving his truck that day, and do other things besides just yell at him. And so, yeah, I think that there's some idea of that. I don't know if I would stretch that out to be charitable in that idea, but I suppose there's a thin thread there.
Well, not yelling at someone for cutting you off isn't really it's being more charitable if there's people in your car for not having to put them through that. More, I think it all depends on how further they take it. Charitable would be, I was following a little close, maybe he just didn't see me, type thing. So I mean,
sure, I suppose you could, like you said, in column A, column B, there's things that we do on a daily basis, continual daily basis, that lead to bigger things,
right,
lead to bigger acts of charity, I suppose.
Yeah. We haven't, once again, Freemasonry hasn't cornered the market on being a good person.
What?
I know, it's shocking. So a lot of the simpler, and I hate to use the term commonsensical because common sense doesn't exist, but things that we think of, charitable, I think we need to step past further than that. We need to, focus less, as I said, less on the dollar charity and more on the, individual improvement charity. That's probably not making as much sense as I want it to. I'm tired.
But yeah, I guess, for some people who are really trying to, curb their reactions, improve themselves in how they deal with other humans. I could see some of that as being charitable efforts, right? Or at least referred to, right? For some people, anyways. What's that?
I was going to say, he talks about the idea that the lodge used to be known in the community as kind of the charitable organization. If you thought of charitable organizations, people would think of the lodge. But this is probably many, many years ago. Sorry for the sirens; they're not coming to get me. I don't think. Would we still want that assumption today, or we certainly wouldn't have that assumption today necessarily, because I think society has grown to a much different point than they are 100 years ago. Yeah, we might have the Freemasons Lodge may have been that organization that was the charitable group because there wasn't a Red Cross or whatever, or organized health centers, or things like that, or even organized government. There may not have been, but the Freemasons Lodge might have been 100, 150 years ago that charitable organization that was there to be benevolent and assist if somebody needed money or needed the whatever, because they were the organized group at the time. But now, 100 years later, there's lots of organizations that fill those roles. And so,
very good point. Very good point. Right? It was us. We were known for that because we were one of the few organizations that existed. In that sense, I could see that, but I guess something that I've had conversation recently on Facebook that about the lodges and the activities and the festive boards and the numbers of people that stick around for them and whatnot, realizing that lodges are different everywhere, and they do different things. And I could see some lodges being more focused on doing charitable type things in their community. So therefore, in that community, they would get that reputation. And maybe where this fellow was from, back when this was written, that was the impression in their neighborhood. You know what I mean? So,
Most,
we got.
well, no, I was going to say most fraternal organizations started as mutual aid societies. So we weren't the only ones. We just think we were, because there were tons, especially in the United States, there were tons of fraternal organizations that you joined because you were. This is pre-union, like unions, bad, type thing. So fraternal orders, they were the ones that were set up that you paid into in case you got killed on the job or hurt or something. And you would have it was pre WCB up here in BC. And so yeah, but I mean that was for the most part, that's what fraternal organizations was your mutual aid societies. So, and as society has matured and we have our not-for-profits and stuff that exist to help out and stuff, and our governments that take over some more of the less profitable, I'd use the term less profitable, but they take over more of the charitable arms of things. Is that something that as Freemasons we need to focus on? Because, as you said, 100 years ago when government was less organized.
Well, relatively, right? I mean,
but yeah, but 100 years ago, there weren't, we didn't have, up here it's called, employment insurance. We didn't have pension plans. We didn't have health insurance that, your employer had to pay into for you. So you needed those mutual, what did I call them? Oh, see, the name's gone.
Mutual aid societies, yeah.
Yeah, mutual aid society. So that you had that sort of that little parachute that you could fall back on. So I guess my question is that as our society has progressed and we have organizations that are dedicated solely to charity, is it something that we should we be, like I said, moving past the dollar charity and starting to work towards being more charitable ourselves in the way that we interact with the world?
Have I ever asked do you guys have a Masonic home of sorts, something like that seemed to be a popular thing in the early 20s during that time of boom,
right?
A lot of Masonic homes were stood up. I know a lot of states down
here in Canada we have, at least up here in BC we have BC Housing, which is no, they're not a crown corporation, but they're basically they're the ones in charge of most subsidized housing. So, and I know that like up here in Penticton, we have specifically a seniors housing. There's a building, Abbott Towers, that is for subsidized housing for seniors.
Was that around 100 years ago though?
No. Oh God, no. No, this is all, I believe post 60s,
Sure.
So
the Freemasons there didn't fill that gap somehow, or think they needed to fill that gap. I guess it seems like in the States anyway. I don't know about the rest of the world, but a lot of the states have Masonic homes that were probably stood up about that same time. Because we had, Matt, when was ours? 1920s, 24, 25, 27, something there. For certainly pre-1930. Actually, I think it was even before that, right? I think the old Masonic home was in the 20s, but then it started in Puyallup down here in the maybe even the teens. I don't know exactly now. I'd have to read about it again, but it was pretty early. Matt's going to go to the all-knowing Google. But yeah, I know there was a lot of them, and they, at least in Washington, the idea was that you would kind of give your wealth, whatever you had left, essentially to the Masonic home. But then what if a guy had nothing? In the Masonic, that was kind of the idea, that they had to, they're supposed to give all their stuff, but what if they had nothing to give? And then now how are they supposed to take care of them for the next 20 years or whatever of his life? But,
so when Masons died, they bequeathed everything to the Masonic home, and their children went.
I think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know exactly the rules how that worked, but my understanding was that they would bequeath everything essentially. But again, if somebody didn't have anything to give, but he was still assumed that he was going to be taken care of.
Right.
So the committee to establish the Masonic home was started in 1892. It wasn't until 1900 that they resolved to establish one.
Okay, so it was a little earlier than I thought.
In 1911, annual communication.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
And
you're
it started in
accurate.
a small, like a boarding house, basically a small building in it's area called Puyallup. It's just north of the old Capitol, south of Seattle. But then it moved in 24 or 27 or something to the new Masonic home that is no longer Masonic.
Well, and you guys also have the Washington Masonic Charities Foundation, right? And so is that run by Grand Lodge or is that separate entity altogether?
Yes. That could be a whole show.
Yes, it could.
Which we've talked about the possibility of having the new executive director on, but that could be a whole show.
Yeah, it's its own legal entity, but whatever. Most of the board is elected by Grand Lodge, so it's a symbiotic sort of relationship,
Yeah, so
which I don't exactly understand, honestly.
so half the board is the elected Grand Lodge officers, junior, senior, deputy, Grand Master, and then four more are elected by the body of Freemasonry. So there's a dominance of non-elected, non-officer elected board members, but it's still pretty heavy. The idea was that you weren't supposed to look at the end of the table and say, yes, Grandmaster. That was the idea, that you're supposed to be all brothers at the table. And I don't know that, I don't think any of those guys listen to this show, so I probably don't have to worry about it, but I don't think that has continued to exist. I was actually the first elected. The other guys were appointed originally, and then I was the first elected trustee to Wash Masonic, now called Services, Wash Masonic Services. We could talk about this for probably a half hour. It's been Wash Masonic Charities forever. Wash Masonic Charities everybody understands what the idea is, but there was this underlying current that the word charity implied something different than it is, and so they changed it to Wash Masonic Services. Dun, dun, dun.
Interesting, right? Yeah, and we don't really have that. We have things that our Grand Lodge does, like things that we support. We are in our annual dues and our stipend to Grand Lodge. There's an amount that's dedicated to go to, I think, the cancer card program and other things like that, right? And so I guess through that we do, as a group, some charitable work, and I guess a lot of guys think, well, that's that's being done now, and then that's we contribute to that, right? But then there's other guys I see, they go above and beyond in everything they do, in all facets of life, and they never let things like that restrict them from, I've already done that, right? No, they still go and do more, right? So I don't know. I think there's a good blend of charitable work that's done, but like I say, a lot of it goes unseen, so hard to gauge.
And on that, as someone who has been called out by Jarrod for being uncharitable by Lodge brothers for thinking that some of them are jerk faces, we probably about time to wrap up our discussion here. I think the hierarchy that we figured out is writing checks is nice, actually doing something about it is better, self-improvement really cool, and probably kind of leads to the other two on some level, but is the higher of the callings. And on that note, if we'd like to hear from you, please let us know. Comment on whatever it is, YouTube or Facebook and that sort of stuff. We'd like to hear comments and hear your thoughts on the topics. And we look forward to talking to you next time on the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.